What's up, guys? It's Rowan here from Artist Smart TV, and today I'm sitting down and chatting to Kira, one of our Pathfinder alumni. Now, Kira had two major works that she was doing for two of her subjects, and at the same time was grappling with HSC trials, which I think for anyone sounds like a recipe for high stress and the risk of burnout. And so in today's episode, we're going to be chatting with Kira to find out, how she managed multiple major works, how she managed dealing with the trials and still at the end of the journey doing incredibly well in terms of her ATAR and her offers for university. So welcome, Kira.
Hi, Rowan.
Now, just so we get to know you a little bit, what school did you go to? What subjects did you do during Year 12?
So I went to St Ives High. During Year 12, I did History Extension, Spanish Beginners, English Advanced, Maths Standard, and Society and Culture.
Cool, and so out of those, we've got two major works in Society and Culture and in History Extension.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got these two major works going on.
Yep.
Fun challenge throughout the year.
Yeah.
I guess what I'd want to understand, and just so we've got tips and some advice for other students, how did you, and this is not trials yet, we're going to get to that, how did you just manage having two major works throughout your HSC generally?
I think the major thing for me was planning and keeping on track of, when things were due, checking in with teachers, but also the biggest tip that I think would make it easiest to manage is really to pick something you love. Because for me, the fact that I picked topics that I was really interested in, really passionate about, helped me feel motivated to want to research and to want to stay on top of it and to do my best work, which made it really easy to sort of break it down into smaller bits, to sort of chunk it out so I could plan it easier.
So let's dive into a couple of things there, because I think you've said a couple of things that are important. First of all, you said stay on top of dates.
Yeah.
How did you do that? Was there Google Calendars? Was there spreadsheets? What was your process for staying on top of it?
My process mostly for that was on paper. I would sort of plan out when I should have things due by, and for most of my major works like Society and Culture, I made a really long list of every little thing I needed to get done, like a checklist, and I'd put a date next to it, just so I could keep on track, and I'd sort of refer that to my teacher to make sure that I was keeping on track and trying to stay a little bit ahead. So I think in the end, I ended up submitting my major work to my teacher about 2 weeks before the actual NESA due date, which was really good because that meant I had that time to really cut down on the words because I was way over and just keep on top of it. So you've got that extra time so you're not cutting it fine in the end.
And I think that's so important because I hear for so many students that do major works that it's literally like this scramble last minute and then they're always over the word count invariably.
Definitely had that problem.
Then it's like the panic of what do I cut and how do I cut it. So just to recap, it sounds like really what you did was really backwards plan. You worked out, well, okay, here's the real date, the NESA hard date. Yeah. Here's when I would ideally like to have it in for my teacher. And then you've written that list of here are all the things and then the dates. Now those dates, I'm sure some of those were taken from advice that your teacher gave you in terms of expectations of when to get stuff done. But I find that often those dates are for big milestones. They'll give you the big milestones. They don't really give you like the little steps along the way. Yeah. So were you breaking it down into, how granular were you breaking this down into?
I was breaking it down pretty fine. So usually I would do it even by paragraph. So because, for example, the Society and Culture major work, that's a really big one. It's about 5,000 words and there's a really solid structure for each part that they want you to do. So, they specify they want you to do a paragraph on this, an introduction on this. So I'd really break it down into subsections. So I'd have, okay, I need to finish my introduction, but within that I need to do this paragraph specifically, this paragraph and this paragraph.
So that was quite detailed.
Yeah.
So that's breaking an intro down into three actual different action items with due dates attached. Now, you said you did that on paper. Was that then something you stuck on a wall so that you could just see when the dates were?
Yeah, so because it has basically 3 chapters, introduction, conclusion, appendix, bibliography, there's so many different sections going on. So I'd sort of put it into that order and then break it down within that. And I just typed up a big checklist, put it on my wall, and then each time I finished it, I could just physically tick it off.
But that felt good, yeah. Amazing. So then that's, I guess, managing this throughout, the year, I suppose, in terms of having these two major works that you're sort of balancing. I guess what I'm mindful of then as well is you've then got trials that arrive, right? Now, my understanding is that you've got, in most cases, your sort of final drafts and the actual final submissions themselves due at a pretty similar time. How did that work for you? when was your trials? When were these things due?
So I think the major works were due like a week or two before trials, which really threw me, which meant that trials were a bit of a shock to the system. You know, given I'd dedicated all my time to finishing these major works, getting them polished, I've been really throwing myself into that. And then to have trials in the mix with only like a week or two to actually study for the subject aside from the major work, yeah, that came as a bit of a shock.
Cool. So now what we should just quickly do is just fast forward for students watching. How did you end up going ATAR-wise at the end of the journey?
At the end of the journey, I ended up with a 95.
Well done. Congratulations. So the point of me raising that is clearly you found a way to get through it.
Yeah, trials was not good.
Even though trials was pretty scary. So it sounds like what went wrong with trials was even though you were so forward planning with your major works, right, in terms of, you know, you had all the dates. Sounds like what happened was that along the way, putting in some consistent work on some of the other subjects, particularly in the lead up to trials, right, fell off. Is that what happened?
Yeah, it became a lot to manage. You know, it's that first time you ever have to experience balancing 5 or 6 subjects and, you know, studying for each of them. And having never done a block of exams like that, it came as a real shock to the system. So I think I didn't manage it as well as I could have, but at the end of the day, that was a really good lesson for me, and I kind of needed that sort of shock of not doing as well as I'd previously been doing to sort of get me back on track for HSC and realize, look, you know, I've done these exams before now, I know what to expect for the actual HSC, so I think in the end it really helped me.
Yeah, amazing. And so then, what would you recommend for other students that are taking major works and grappling with trials, whether or not it's 1 or 2 major works, given your experience and your learnings now, what would you be saying in terms of the strategies or the steps that they should take to avoid, you know, the sense of hitting a wall when trials hit?
Yeah, I think the main thing for major works is to stay on top of them, and to be ahead is a really good idea, because then you can get those done and you can allocate separate blocks of time to study for, you know, the content for the exams. But also I think a really important thing to remember is that trials aren't the be all end all. You know, you can bounce back, and, you know, those setbacks can be overcome and they can be useful to learn from.
So in other words, don't quit if you don't do so well.
Because, you know, if I had got my trials marks in HSC, I would not have done anywhere near as well as I did. So
what I'm hearing, because I just want to break that down a little bit further as well, it really sounds like once, if you get ahead on your major works, it actually creates a little bit more of a window so that you can then do your trial prep, right? Because you're not right up until trial still madly trying to finish your major works. So that's step number 1. It sounds like though step number 2 in there is that you should also be probably, just like you've got a plan for your major works, right? Actually mapping out a little bit of a trials plan. You know, I don't know, 3 months, 8 weeks, you know, prior, where you're slotting in the work that you're going to need to do for your trials alongside your major work prep. Because I think my reflection from, you know, seeing a lot of students navigate major works is that it can really easily take all of your focus. You know, because it's this big thing, it's got this big due date. You know, you've poured your heart and soul, because usually you're passionate about it. You don't usually do it if you're not. And so then, as a result, it can really, I see, pull students away. And unfortunately, the HSCs, you know, it's a 10-unit game. You've got to do well across 5 subjects minimum. And so it sounds like having that bigger picture plan becomes really, really important. I guess the question on that, because I know as part of the Pathfinder program, that was something that we were trying to help you and the rest of the students with, is really to think a lot more about how do we actually build you know, a more effective plan to manage whether or not it's study, early entry applications, or even your major works. What were some of the key things you learned around planning and studying smart that really helped you just manage the stress and the, you know, the risk of burnout that sort of sits across the Year 12 journey?
I think the most important thing for me is to learn that you've got to find what works best for you, because I know there are a lot of people out there that can plan maybe 2 months in advance, 3 months in advance, write out this amazing plan and stick to it, and you see them, you're like, I'm so jealous. But, you know, to know what works for you really helps, because, you know, that is something I tried and I just ended up never being able to stick to it. So for me, I think breaking it down into smaller chunks and planning ahead over the course of about a week really helped for me. So I'd use the Art of Smart weekly breakdown by subject, and I just put in, you know, English, what I have to do today, and I do that for every subject, every day of the week, and that really helped me to, you know, stay on top, but also to be able to map out what exactly I was going to do and tick it off at the end of the day, so you get that satisfaction. And I think the big picture really is important, because the major works, it's really important to remember that they do end, they do finish, and then you have all that time afterwards, and it makes HSC seem so much easier once you've got them out the way and you're like, great, now I have all this extra time I can dedicate to my other subjects. So it kind of sets you up well mentally.
And so it sounds like what I'm hearing is that you should almost have, and you may have, different strategies around even planning for different subjects, because my sense is your major works, you plan them quite well in advance.
Yeah.
And that works for you for those, right? But
Yeah.
it seems like for some of your other subjects, trying to do a longer term plan, like even a term plan, it didn't seem like that
didn't
worked
work
for you.
me.
It sounded like you just needed to do like, okay, next week, what do I got to do?
Yeah.
And so it sounds like being comfortable with that, in recognizing, okay, for some subjects, this approach is going to work really well for me, but I don't need to like copy and paste that
Yeah, exactly.
across everything.
Sometimes a long-term plan can be really difficult for some subjects, especially if they're like humanities. It can be kind of hard to map out exactly what's the best thing to do in the long term. You know, if it's like a maths or a science, it's easy to say, okay, I'll complete chapter 1, 2, 3, you know, but some of those other subjects that are a bit more nuanced can be really hard to plan in the long term, which is why I found that weekly breakdown like way easier. But then again, for the major works, since some of them had such a solid structure, that's why it was like so much easier to plan out in advance.
Yeah, it was more workable using that. Amazing. So now one of the things that as part of Pathfinder program, is working with a mentor. How did Melanie particularly, as a mentor, support you on your journey during year 12?
I think the main thing she was really good for was just a sense of support, and honestly just a really good chat, because all my mentors were really like-minded and we both had really similar interests. Melanie actually went to my school and did the same subjects, so we had a really good rapport, and it was really nice just to get that check-in, and she'd just be like, how are you going with your sleep and your eating? So sort of having that focus that wasn't just on school and it was a bit more long-term really helped sort of guide my path, and it was really useful for university because she'd outlined everything you do in a psychology course, which is really useful for me as that was something I was considering. So I think just having that guidance that wasn't so much focused on the short term of school was really useful.
So bigger picture, health and well-being with school, and even the sort of university, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Which I know you were grappling with a couple of options in the mix. So then what would you say was maybe the most impactful thing or the best thing that sort of Melanie shared with you that sort of stuck with you?
Honestly, I think the most important thing she said to me that really helped me was when she said, you're fine. I have no issues with any, you're doing well, you'll be fine. And I was like, oh, that's really nice to hear, because, you get to that point where you're so stressed, you see what everyone else is doing, you get really worried, but just to hear her say, no, you're fine, you've got this, was like, oh, okay. And that was a really nice moment. That did stick with me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because you're right, it's so easy to, because HSC unfortunately is so competitive, it can be so easy throughout it to always be looking at everyone else.
Yeah, but just to hear her say, no, I don't see any problems with anything you're doing, you're tracking really well, just that little bit of reassurance was really good. And I still remember her telling me, oh, I think you'll get a 95 ATAR. She told me those exact words and I was like, no way. And then
Happened.
I did. So yeah, that was really good.
Now, I know one of the things along your journey that you were exploring was early entry as well. Just as why did you think about early entry? What was the rationale behind, looking into early entry?
I think early entry was really good for me because it just meant that you had that sort of security, knowing that, if something went wrong, you still had that offer. So it was really nice to have for me as a fallback, but I knew that I wanted to still do as best as I could and still get the highest ATAR possible, just for personal satisfaction, but having those offers was really good.
Amazing. And so you did apply for a couple and you received a couple offers. So you applied at Macquarie University, is that correct?
Yeah.
And you ended up successfully getting 2 offers.
Yes.
What were they?
Social sciences and psychology.
Cool, amazing. Now, what I'd love to get a sense of, I guess, is, how did because I know we ran an opportunity intensive that sort of ran through thinking about how to apply. Yes. I guess, what did the intensive look like? What did you take out from it? What did the support look like just around helping you with your early entry application?
I think the intensive was really useful for sort of rethinking university, because I think there are a lot of traditional assumptions people have about university. I know, as you say, surrounding the branding and, its image, but I think it was really useful just to think of university in a bit of a different light, as an investment and as something that you want to have a personal connection with, which was really helpful. And then I think with the application side of things, having that different focus on how you write about yourself and your achievements and your interests was really useful, like the STAR framework, and just having that workshop was so good for just thinking, oh, I have more achievements than you think, because you look at other people and you're like, oh my gosh, they're on the debating team, they're doing this, and you think, oh, I don't have much, that I can mention. But I think that workshop really helped you sort of play to your own strengths and see what you have.
Cool, amazing. Now, given that you successfully wrote your application and you got 2 offers, which is, what advice would you have, whether or not it was some tips and stuff that you learned through the program or just from your own experience, that you would give to other students thinking or currently, like writing and putting their own application together?
I think I would say to them that everyone has strengths and they all have something interesting about them. I know it can be really easy to just dismiss any achievement as, oh, that's not impressive enough, oh, that's not interesting enough, but everyone has something that is like that. And I think just sitting back, taking a moment to just brainstorm everything that you consider achievement, no matter how small, and then just pick at it, you can find something. And I think that's the most daunting part for a lot of students, is they look at that application and they go, I don't have anything to say, but I think really taking that moment to reflect and think, oh, I do have some achievements, and they don't have to be limited to school, I think is another thing. So yeah.
I think that's very true. I mean, obviously it depends a little on which university. Some universities have bigger focuses on different things, but I'd certainly agree. I think everyone does have strengths, and it's just a matter of, recognizing them, uncovering them. Amazing. Now, what throughout the year, we ran workshops and career Q&As. Were there any that sort of particularly you enjoyed that sort of stood out for you?
Yeah, I think the one I mainly enjoyed was the end of year intensive surrounding, alternate pathways and the resume building, because I think having that in-person workshop was really good for me to actually meet the people I was working with and to make some friends, because I did struggle a bit with the Zooms. But yeah, that workshop was really useful, and I found the resume building in particular so good, because I'd been submitting the same resume everywhere thinking it was great, and having that sort of reframing and constructing it again, I was like, wow, so that was really useful and helped me get some.
Cool. What was one of the things you learned on the day with your resume in particular that you realised you needed to change up?
Short and sweet. I had a resume of about 4 pages and I thought that was great, so I think knowing to keep it short and sweet and changing it up really helped.
Were there any other sort of takeouts you had on sort of from the professional intensive, which was that final intensive?
Yeah, I think creating a sort of different pathway that runs alongside university and school and the academic side of things, that was really useful, just to map out, what else do I want to achieve, what else is there, and just sort of planning out when that would start and when that would happen really helped me to feel a bit more motivated, a bit more comfortable with the idea of starting university and fitting in all those extra things.
Reflecting back on the journey, what was your favourite part of the Pathfinder program? I'd
definitely say my favourite part was the last intensive, actually getting to meet everyone and getting to all work together and sort of brainstorm, and the sense of support, and it became like a little Art of Smart community. It was really nice towards the end. Everyone was still messaging each other and wanting to meet up, and it was really nice to have that connection with the like-minded students.
What would you say to other people, other students, in future years that are thinking, they've seen this Pathfinder thing, they're thinking, oh, should I do it, should I not? Do you have any suggestions or advice for them?
I would say go for it. I mean, when I applied, I didn't think that I had anything of merit to offer. I just did it on a whim, and I was like, oh, I don't have the impressive achievements, but I think it's really useful to consider the aspects that are outside of school, and I think the Pathfinder program was really good for that, just sort of reframing university and life after school and those sort of skills you need for networking and the things you need when you finish school, because whilst academic support is really useful, it does come to an end. So I think having that long-term plan through the Pathfinder program and also the sense of support through the mentors is really useful for keeping you on track and motivated and feeling a bit more comfortable with life after school.
Unfortunately, I think, stress, anxiety and burnout is such a prevalent challenge for so many Year 12 students. And I know even last year, even bigger, just because of COVID and the impacts that had. How did you manage it? Were there any tips or advice based on your own journey and experience that you'd offer to students that are going through in future years that might also struggle with that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, as much as you might feel stressed about it, taking time to yourself to do things that aren't related to school is really essential, because whilst you might be stressed going, oh, I need to study, taking that time to just go out with your friends or just go for a run or do something by yourself that isn't related to school is really good to get you in that mindset. And you don't want to let study consume you, because it comes to an end and then you feel really lost. So I think just having a good balance, because there were times when I was like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be out studying, but in the end it all works out.
Cool, awesome. Now, final fun question. If you could take a time machine and go back to the start of Year 12, what do you wish you would have done differently?
I think there are some subjects I would have worked harder in consistently throughout the year. Like maths has never been a strong suit of mine. I ended up doing okay, but trials was definite downfall, bottom of the class. So I think working consistently in the subject areas I was weaker in, even though I didn't like them, I think was something I would have done. And there are some subjects I probably wouldn't have picked, but sticking at them was useful. So yeah.
When you say consistency, I'd love to talk a little bit more about that, because I think that's got to be one of the biggest challenges. How did you, what would you recommend to students who are struggling with consistency?
Yeah, I think recognising the importance of consistency is really essential, because there are a lot of assessments that start really early on in year 12 and you think, oh, you know, it's the first one, doesn't really matter. But I think taking every single assessment as seriously as possible and just working hard, chipping away at it really helps, because like I said, I had the same thing. I was really glad I worked consistently up until trials, because, you know, there was quite a drop in my marks, but because I'd been consistent all year and done well in all the other assessments, that ended up, you know, saving me. So I think just chipping away at it will help you keep on track and you'll feel a bit more motivated. And I think it's really important to keep up that consistency so you don't burn out.
The key there is then, you know, like what, after you have assessments, not just collapsing and doing nothing for a month? Is that sort of what we're talking about?
I think just diving into the next thing. I know, as stressful as it sounds, I think if you just take that time to sort of get a little bit ahead, it'll help you understand a bit more deeply what you're doing, and then when you're in class you can relax a bit more, because I know class time isn't always productive for some people. So I think the main thing for me was just being consistent, especially with like English, for example, because it's such a content heavy subject. You know, as soon as you finish that assessment, just trying to get a little bit ahead on what your next module might look like, even if it's just, you know, reading the blurb of the book or, you know, reading the module descriptor, just to get a little bit of an idea really helps you keep on track.
Awesome. Any other final advice, comments, anything else you'd love to share that I haven't asked already?
No, I just think work hard, work consistently and have fun, because year 12 is a really good year of your life. I know a lot of people say it's really stressful, but at the end of the day, the friendships you make and, you know, the lifelong connection you have with your school is really important too.